You already know enough. That is not your problem. You have read the books. You have studied the charts. You have watched the videos, taken the courses, maybe even paid for mentorship. You can explain support and resistance. You understand risk-reward ratios. You know what a moving average crossover looks like. And yet, here you are, still losing, still frustrated, still wondering why the knowledge is not translating into results. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice is starting to say something you do not want to hear, that maybe this is not for you. That voice is wrong, but not for the reason you think. The uncomfortable truth is this: your problem is not a strategy problem. It never was. The reason you keep losing is not because you have the wrong system. It is because you are using the right system with the wrong mind. You are approaching a probability-based activity as if it were a prediction-based one. And that single distinction, that one mental difference, is responsible for nearly every mistake you have made in your trading career. I have spent decades studying what separates traders who eventually find consistency from those who never do. Not studying charts, not studying markets, studying minds. The way people think about uncertainty, the way they respond to loss, the way they talk themselves into bad trades and out of good ones. And what I have found consistently is that the losing trader and the winning trader are often using the exact same strategy. The difference is not what they know. It is how they think. This video is going to show you that difference. Not in theory. In the specific, practical way it shows up in your trading, in your thoughts, your decisions, your reactions. And more importantly, it is going to show you how to change it. Not with motivation, not with discipline tips, but with a fundamental shift in how you understand what trading actually is. Here is where it starts. Here is the root of the problem. Your brain was not built for trading. I do not mean that as an insult. I mean it as a precise, clinical observation. The human brain evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to do one thing above everything else: keep you alive. And the way it keeps you alive is by recognizing patterns and assigning meaning to them. When something looks familiar, your brain says, I know what this means. I know what comes next. And it acts accordingly, fast, decisively, without waiting for confirmation. In the physical world, that instinct saves lives. If you are walking through a forest and you hear a sound that resembles what a predator makes, you do not stop to gather more data. You move. You react. The brain that waits to be certain is the brain that does not survive. So over millennia, the human mind became wired for prediction. It became wired to take incomplete information and arrive at a conclusion quickly, confidently, and with a strong emotional commitment to that conclusion. Now place that brain in front of a trading screen. The same mechanism that once protected you from danger is now telling you that you know what this chart is going to do. It is telling you that this setup looks exactly like the last one that worked. It is filling in the gaps with confidence that is not earned. And when the trade goes against you, that same brain, the one that hates being wrong because being wrong once meant being dead, refuses to accept the loss. It hopes, it rationalizes, because admitting the prediction was wrong feels, on a neurological level, like a threat to survival. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is biology operating exactly as designed. But it is operating in the wrong environment. Think about what it feels like to be absolutely certain you left your keys on the counter, and then they are not there. There is a moment of genuine disorientation, a flash of something close to panic. Not because the keys are that important in that moment, but because your brain constructed a reality, and that reality turned out to be false. Now multiply that feeling by the size of your trading account. Multiply it by months of effort. Multiply it by your identity as someone who is trying to master this. That is what happens every time the market moves against your prediction. And the response is never rational. It is always emotional. Because the threat feels real. That is the trap. You are not trading markets. You are managing the conflict between what your brain insists must happen and what the market actually does. And the market does not care about what your brain insists. Let me describe what this looks like in practice. Because I want you to recognize yourself here. Not to make you feel bad, but because awareness is the only door out of this. Let me describe the first behavior. You find a setup. It looks good. Everything aligns: the pattern, the level, the time frame. You enter the trade, and almost immediately, the market moves slightly against you. Not enough to hit your stop, just enough to make you uncomfortable. So you begin watching. Every candle feels personal. Every tick lower feels like confirmation that you were wrong. And then you do something you told yourself you would not do. You move your stop. Just a little. Just to give it more room. You tell yourself this is reasonable. You tell yourself you are being flexible. But what is actually happening is that your brain cannot tolerate the possibility that the prediction was wrong. So it rewrites the rules mid-trade to avoid that conclusion. The loss that was supposed to be $20 becomes $80. And when it finally hits, you do not just lose money, you lose trust in yourself. Here is what happens with the second behavior. The trade works. You are up. You are sitting on a profit that matches your target exactly. And then, instead of closing, you wait. Because now the brain has shifted. Now it is not afraid of being wrong, it is afraid of leaving money on the table. So you hold. And the market reverses. And you watch the profit shrink. And still you hold, because closing now feels like admitting you made a mistake by not closing earlier. So what started as a winning trade closes as a small loss or a scratch. And you sit there wondering how that just happened. It happened because you handed control to an emotion, not a rule. Let me describe the third behavior. You take a loss. A normal loss. The kind that is supposed to happen in trading. But your brain does not experience it as normal. It experiences it as a problem to be solved immediately. So you look for the next trade, not because the setup is there, but because you need to recover. You need to make the loss unhappen. And so you take a trade that does not meet your criteria. You know it does not meet your criteria, but you take it anyway, and it loses, and now you are deeper and more desperate, and the cycle accelerates. This is not poor discipline. This is the brain in threat response mode, trying to fix something it perceives as danger. Here is what happens with the fourth behavior. You watch a setup form. It meets every condition. It is exactly what your system calls for. And you do not take it. Because the last three trades lost. Because something feels off. Because you are not sure. So you watch it. And it works. Perfectly. And you sit there with a familiar, hollow frustration, not at the market, but at yourself. What stopped you was not analysis. It was the accumulated emotional weight of previous losses distorting your perception of a perfectly valid opportunity. Your brain said the pattern means danger now, even though the pattern was sound. Let me describe the fifth behavior, because this one is perhaps the most insidious. You begin changing your system. Not because the system is broken, but because you cannot tolerate the uncertainty it produces. Each loss feels like evidence that the system is wrong. So you add an indicator. Then another. You change the time frame. You tighten the entry rules. You are constantly optimizing, not toward better trading, but toward the illusion of certainty. You are trying to build a system that never loses. And that system does not exist. It has never existed. And the search for it will consume years of your trading life if you let it. Every single one of these behaviors comes from the same place. You are trying to predict. And when the prediction fails, your brain does everything it can to deny, recover, or avoid the discomfort of that failure. The market does not care about your prediction. It never did. And until you accept that deeply, not just intellectually, you will keep repeating these patterns regardless of which strategy you use. So what is the alternative? If prediction thinking is the problem, what does the solution actually look like? It looks like this. You stop trying to know what the market will do. And you start thinking in probabilities. I know that sounds simple. I know you may have heard something like it before. But I want you to stay with me here, because most people here think in probabilities, and they nod and they move on without actually understanding what it requires of them. It does not just require a different thought. It requires a different belief system. And those are not the same thing. A thought is something you can adopt in a moment. A belief is something your nervous system acts on automatically. You can think, this trade might lose, while your body is already in full emotional response to the possibility of that loss. That is not probability thinking. That is prediction thinking with a disclaimer attached to it. Real probability thinking changes how you feel before, during, and after the trade, not just how you talk about it. Let me give you a comparison that makes this concrete. Think about a casino. Not the gambler, the casino itself. The casino does not know what will happen on any single spin of the roulette wheel. It has no ability to predict whether the next hand of blackjack will go in its favor. And yet, the casino is completely calm. It is not anxious. It is not hoping. It is not watching the table with any emotional investment in a single outcome. Because the casino understands something the gambler does not. It understands that its edge, the small statistical advantage built into every game, will express itself over a large enough sample of outcomes. Any single result is irrelevant. The edge is what matters. And the edge is only visible across many, many trades. The casino does not close down because it had a losing night. It does not change its rules because one player got lucky. It does not stop dealing cards because the last 5 hands went against the house. It keeps operating. Systematically, neutrally. Because it knows that the math works over time, and that no single event can tell it anything meaningful about whether the system is sound. That is what probability thinking looks like applied to trading. When you genuinely adopt this framework, something shifts. The individual trade stops being a referendum on your ability. It stops being a test of whether your analysis was correct. It becomes what it actually is, one event in a long series of events, none of which carries enough weight on its own to mean anything significant. A loss is not a problem. It is a data point. A winner is not validation. It is a data point. What matters is whether your edge, applied consistently over time, produces a positive result. That is the only question worth asking. And here is what trading looks like when this truth is actually applied, not performed, not recited, but genuinely internalized. You see a setup. It meets your criteria. You enter without hesitation, because you are not entering because you know it will work. You are entering because it fits the conditions under which your edge has historically been present. You place your stop where your system says to place it. You define your risk before the trade begins, and then you let the market do what it will do. If it hits your stop, you close the trade without resentment because you never believed this specific trade had to work. You believed in the process, and the process is intact. If it hits your target, you close it. Not because you are greedy, not because you are afraid, but because that was the plan, and you follow the plan. There is no drama in this. There is no elation and no devastation. There is just the quiet, steady execution of a process that you trust. Not because it never loses, but because you understand that losing is part of what makes the edge real. That kind of trading is available to you. Let me show you 2 traders, same market, same day. Same setup appears on both of their screens at the same moment. The first trader sees the setup and feels something tighten in his chest. He has had 3 losing trades this week. The last one hurt, not just financially, but in the way it confirmed a fear he carries quietly, the fear that he is not good enough for this. So when this new setup appears, he does not see a setup. He sees a question. He sees a test. He watches the candle form and he waits, not because he is being disciplined, but because he is afraid. He needs more confirmation. He needs to feel certain before he enters. So he waits for one more signal, and then one more. And by the time he feels safe enough to enter, the move is already half over. He enters late. His risk is now larger than it should be, because the entry point has shifted, and his stop is in the wrong place. The trade eventually reverses and takes him out at a loss. A loss that would not have happened if he had entered where his system told him to. He closes the trade feeling worse than before. Not just because of the money. Because of what the loss means to him. It means he was wrong again. It means the market beat him again. He spends the next hour reviewing the chart, building a case for why the setup was flawed, why the market was manipulated, why the conditions were unusual. He is not analyzing. He is protecting himself from a truth he is not yet ready to accept. The second trader sees the same setup. She has also had losses this week, but she experiences them differently, not as judgments, but as outcomes. She knows that her system does not win every trade. She has never expected it to. What she expects is that over the next 50, 100 200 trades, her edge will produce a positive result if she executes consistently. So when the setup appears, she does not feel a question. She feels recognition. The conditions are met. She enters at the right place, sets her stop where the system dictates, defines her risk, and this is the part that is hardest to understand until you have lived it, she releases the trade. She is not watching every tick. She is not hoping. She is not managing her emotions in real time, because her emotions are not in conflict with the outcome. She has already accepted, before the trade even opens, that it may lose. That acceptance is not resignation. It is freedom. If it loses, she closes it cleanly and moves to the next one. If it wins, she closes it at target and moves to the next one. The market does not care about her feelings, and she has stopped needing it to. The difference between these two traders is not intelligence. It is not work ethic. It is not access to better tools or better information. The difference is what they believe about what trading is. The first trader believes trading is about being right. So every loss is a failure of self. Every win is temporary relief. He is on an emotional treadmill that never stops, because the market will always provide enough losses to keep him running. The second trader believes trading is about executing a process consistently across a large sample of outcomes. So the individual result carries almost no emotional weight. She is not detached from trading. She is deeply engaged with it, but she is engaged with the process, not the outcome. This is what consistency actually looks like. It is not the absence of losses. It is the absence of the emotional meaning you attach to them. And that is a choice, a difficult one. A choice that requires you to examine beliefs you have held so long you no longer recognize them as beliefs. But it is a choice you are capable of making. I want to ask you something. And I want you to sit with it, not answer quickly, but actually consider it. When you take a loss, what does it mean to you? Not what you tell yourself it means. Not the rational explanation you construct afterward. What does it feel like? Does it feel like information? Or does it feel like failure? Does it feel like one outcome in a long series of outcomes, neutral, expected, accounted for? Or does it feel personal? Does it feel like the market saw you coming and took something from you? Here is the second question. When you break your rules, when you move the stop, when you skip the valid trade, when you revenge trade after a loss, what do you tell yourself in that moment? Do you tell yourself you are being flexible, that you are reading the market, that this time is different? And afterward, when you see what actually happened, do you look at the market first, or do you look at yourself? Here's the third question. If you discovered with absolute certainty that your current system had a genuine edge, that over the next 500 trades it would produce consistent profits, if executed without deviation, would your trading change tomorrow? Would you take every setup without hesitation? Would you close every loss without resentment? Would you let the winners run to target without fear? Or would something in you still resist? And if something would still resist, what is that something? Because that something is the real problem, not your system, not the market, not your broker. That something right there is what has been standing between you and consistency. Here is the fourth question, and it is the most important one. What kind of trader do you want to become? Not what results do you want. Not how much money do you want to make. What kind of mind do you want to bring to this? Because the results will follow the mind. They always do. You cannot think like a losing trader and produce winning results indefinitely. The math does not allow it. The psychology does not allow it. Eventually, the mind you bring to trading will determine everything. The market does not care about your history. It does not care about the months you have lost, the money you have spent learning, the frustration you carry into every session. It offers the same opportunities to every participant, without preference, without mercy, without interest in your story. What you do with those opportunities is entirely determined by what happens inside you, not outside. This is why the traders who eventually find consistency almost always say the same thing when they look back. They say it was never about the market. It was never about finding the right system, or the right indicator, or the right mentor. It was about learning to think differently about uncertainty, about accepting that they could not control outcomes, only process. about releasing the need to be right and replacing it with the commitment to be consistent. Trading, at its deepest level, is not about money. It is about your relationship with uncertainty, with loss, with being wrong, with letting go of control. Every session is a mirror, and what you see in that mirror, your patience, your honesty, your discipline, your fear, is who you are. The market does not create that. It simply reveals it. The question is not whether you can become a consistent trader. The question is whether you are willing to become the person that requires